A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, a great adventure took place.
Talking Bird, a special edition.
Hello and welcome to Talking Bird, the special edition, episode 83. I'm your host, Robert Zachary, along with my co-host, birthday boy, John Llewellyn. How's it going, John?
I'm good. Another year older. Well, technically, I guess I'm a week older from when people heard from me last time. But I'm good.
Yes.
I've officially, I was sort of there anyway, but I've officially hit my middle 30s.
Oh, really? Man,
Yep.
you're older than I thought.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait,
so you're turning...
I just sound so youthful.
Yeah, so you're turning 35?
I am.
Wow. I thought you were like 33.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
Well, we always have this running joke on the show about how old I am, and then you always go, "You're not that much older." And I'm always like, I always thought it was like, yeah, he's just saying that because I'm like 12 years older than him. No, you're actually, it's only like a 9-year difference, man. We're almost the same. We're almost the same generation. I was thinking about last week's show when I was kind of talking about trailers, and I fell into that trap that many people my age and older and kind of dissing millennials. I wasn't dissing.
I missed the cutoff by like a year or two. I can't remember which, but it feels odd to like lump 35, 36-year-olds in with people who are 20 because we have very different life experiences.
Yeah, and it's also like it felt like such a cheap shot. And then like I said, with my old idea of thinking he was 33, I was like, yeah, I just kind of threw my co-host under the bus. So I will apologize to all millennials, but that doesn't include you, John. You're not a millennial.
Actually, no, I am technically.
Oh, you are technically.
Yeah. Yes. I'm like a year or two on the millennial side of things, which again, I guess, but I think what happened was when I was growing up, it was like, oh, well, they're not Generation X, but we don't really know what to call them, the next group. And then the younger generation was like, oh, these are millennials. And then it wasn't until a couple years ago that I realized that like they were grouping people in my cohort along with millennials. So like, wait, really? Because again, like a 35, 36-year-old doesn't share a ton in common, I think, with someone who's like 16, 17, 20, 25 even. Right. And so I feel like my age plus, I don't know, 2 or 3 years on either side, it's like this like in between generation where like we don't really fit with the rest of people in our generation, but we're not really Gen X because the people who are Gen X were like who we looked up to or whatever when we were growing up. So it's like I don't really know how to categorize that wedge of age, that age range, I guess.
Yeah, and of course, these demographic. What are they? I'm looking it up. It's just a demographic, and it's kind of a thing where it's like 500 years ago, where they go like, oh, ye is of the mead generation, and you're more of the wine generation. It's so
you Bronze Age children just don't understand.
Exactly. And I mean, that is something that, they found some scroll from 3,000 years ago, and it was like something about, the children no longer listen to their parents and the government is corrupt, and it's like the world is going to hell in a handbasket. And that's like,
right.
Like we're always constantly dealing with the same things over and over. And I feel like maybe as a culture, I don't know what it is like in other countries, but in like America, North America, we tend to hang on to these generational ideas because it's, we all think we're amateur statisticians when we talk about things. And no one is more guilty of that than I am on this show, of just kind of shooting from the hip on this stuff. But yeah, I mean, they would say that I would be right in the middle of Generation X, but I always think of people like Generation X people like being about 10 years older than me. So it's kind of like that thing. But anyway, if you're out there on Twitter and you hear this, you might as well shoot John a happy birthday message because, now he's well into his 30s. He's gonna need that energy boost. His metabolism slowing down. I bet he's got some gray on his temples or something he's probably concerned about.
Well, I mean, there's not a whole lot left on my temples these days to begin with. But
we could do a show about that too. So let's,
I might need to take a nap in the middle of this podcast. So
I always tell people my hair at this age is a race between gone and gray. So anyway, let's talk about Star Wars because it makes me feel young. And what is... God, that really...
We're 12 years old at heart.
That was... Yeah. Man, it's all for 12-year-olds. God, could you imagine if...
12-year-olds.
I wish you guys... I almost thought he was going to go into... I thought... And we're referring to, for people... That was George's comment at Celebration.
Celebration last
week. I almost kind of wish that he had pulled a William Shatner on Saturday Night Live. You remember that his fame, Bill
what the hell is wrong with all you people?
Exactly. Bill Shatner's turn on Saturday Night Live is probably in the top 10, like, celebrity-hosted Saturday Night Live episodes where he famously tells them all to get a life and accuses them of having never kissed a girl or ever moved out of their parents' basement. And I just think that would have been so funny, but it also would have been like, another 3 weeks of George probably touring, Kelly Ripa and Good Morning America apologizing and like I just meant it as a joke. Back in the day we used to make jokes and then, all this happened. Well, that's what I get for selling my my baby to never mind, I can't say that either. But anyway, he did not. So he was that was about as much grit that you can get from George Lucas post his sale to Disney. Of course, I was talking before we started a little bit about how there seems to be a new trend on YouTube, at least the YouTube videos I see, that talk about how angry Mark Hamill is about
Angry Mark.
Yeah, it's just this kind of like Mark Hamill is pissed off at J.J. Abrams, or Mark Hamill is mad at Rian Johnson. And usually it's just they take like a little clip of him kind of at the premiere when he cautions people to be like, if you think it's going to be, this is going to give you your childhood back, then you're probably barking up the wrong tree. It's like that thing where it's like, I don't know if. I'm not going to throw another generation under the bus, but I mean, in general, as a culture, we're much more sensitive to even offhand comments about things they might be leading, or it's just like maybe somebody has tapped into like, actually, there's an underlying thread of Mark Hamill kind of being angry, but whatever. The reason I bring that up is, and we'll get to this in a second, actually, because I realized that I'm kind of burying the lead once again, is that just before we went to air, StarWars.com has announced release dates, two important release dates, one more important than the other, at least as I'm concerned, which would be Episode 9, Colin Trevorrow has directed, which I guess a table read is imminent. May 24th, 2019, so it is jumping... ahead? Yep. Are we saying ahead? Would that be? Was it? It would have been December 18th, 2019. So was that what we saw?
Wait, no, it was always going to be 2019, right? So
Right,
2017 is episode 8. 2018 is the Han Solo movie. 2019 is is episode 9, right? And technically, at least some of those movies were supposed to have been released in May anyway, but they got pushed back to December. So, but then people are like, well, are they is Star Wars gonna, just permanently move their release dates to December so that they can rule Christmas?
Yeah.
And apparently the answer is no.
No, I guess I guess they kind of just it's interesting. It's very interesting. It's kind of like, I always assumed that, like, I think everybody had speculated, like, because Christmas was like seemed to be very effective for The Force Awakens. I don't know how much it was for Rogue One, maybe it might have done. I don't think they're going around saying that Rogue One was a misstep or anything like that. I think they were very happy with how it was received. Even more so, it's maybe exacerbated them doing getting the third spin-off into development. But it just makes you wonder. I mean, I don't know if it's a thing where they don't want to have to compete with. But I mean, I guess that's when Marvel movies come out in May. They usually come out in early May, don't they?
I don't know about early. I guess, right? Because 24th,
Guardians of the Galaxy,
you're bumping right up against Memorial Day weekend, which seems like it would be a time when they would want the Marvel movies to come out.
I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is coming out on the 4th of May. So yeah, generally I've noticed like the
May the 4th be guarded. I don't know.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I think that's kind of the thing about
Future films.
What?
Sorry, I just clicked on a link. The Untitled Avengers film slated for 2019 is coming out May 3rd. So yeah, it looks like you're right. The Marvel movies that have come out in May have come out early May.
Yeah, it's at the. I think
actually that's true. Whatever month they come out, it tends to be the first week of that month. Black Panther is going to be the exception.
Okay, so I mean, maybe it's a thing where they were like, "Hey, we can make more." It has a longer theater run. I mean, I would say that the turnover from Rogue One in theaters to not holding the physical, having the digital copy on my iTunes, was very short. It was like I had already still been considering like hitting the theater one last time right before they announced it, and then you're like, if I just wait 3 weeks, I can watch it in my house. So maybe that's gonna be, maybe they're kind of trying to have a longer theater run. Maybe it's just a thing because it's going to be what they're rumoring is going to be the last Skywalker centric Star Wars film, that they wanted to maybe dovetail that into when George, the rhythm that George had as far as releasing it. It just, the idea that it's 6 months ahead of schedule when you lose a major part of the cast. It's just, it doesn't really raise questions because they wouldn't do it if they didn't feel comfortable. It's just, wow, they've really shortened their workflow to be able to make these movies. And maybe because it used to be, George would make a movie, then he would go into they would probably have some early pre-production of the next one, art and whatever working pretty quickly, but it would still take 3 years. But I guess now if you're having different directors and different producers, I guess you could technically have, different shops working at once. Maybe it's easier to make special effects if they're up and running. It's like, all right, we're making this for the Han Solo movie, and we're doing this for, episode 8, and we're doing animatics for episode 9, and it's like, it's like that thing. It's year-round school. It's the idea of like, well, we'll take short breaks instead of taking 3 months off. And then people don't have to get back into the rhythm of it. I honestly don't know. It would be an interesting question to ask somebody at Lucasfilm if that's why they're able to jump ahead. I mean, at first I thought, well, the big competition would have been Avatar 2, but that's been pushed back to. When has Avatar 2 been pushed back? Now that I'm thinking about it, every time they talk about this, it's like they change it. So I thought initially it's been pushed back to 20, which I know you Avatar fans are
2020.
Okay, it has been pushed back to 2000. Yeah. So it's like that's not going to be a problem. The Avengers, that's the same kind of, in some ways, that's the same umbrella corporation making it. So it's
So July of 2019, the Spider-Man Homecoming 2, or whatever they're going to call the sequel, the second Spider-Man Homecoming movie is scheduled to come out July of 2019. So you could say, well, maybe they're gonna bump up against that. Toy Story 4 is coming out the end of June 2019. So you could say, well, maybe they run up against that. But I think at this point, and especially over the summer, right, people go see movies a ton. And so, how much is there really competition anymore? Where people have to decide, well, I want to go see one. I can only see one of these movies. Is it going to be Star Wars or is it going to be Toy Story 4? It's more like, yeah, okay, they'll go see Star Wars, and then a month later they'll go see Toy Story, and then a month later they'll go see The Lion King or whatever, which is coming out July 19th, 2019. So yeah, I mean, as much as we've talked about this too, that kind of like, well, they don't want to compete with Avatar, or they don't. Are they going to want their Star Wars movies competing with their Marvel movies for screens, and how long they're going to last in the theater? I mean, honestly, there's probably less of that as actual competition today than there was, even 20 years ago, just because of the way movie theaters have developed and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's, there was a physical aspect to, movies, 20, 30 years ago. You'd actually, when a movie had a long run, they would have to strike fresh prints, because by the couple weeks into it, the celluloid on the print looked like crap, and they wouldn't be able to show it in their prestige theaters. Now, when everything's digital, it's like they can show them, they can keep showing them until the light bulb burns out on the projector. So I guess, and it's probably realistic now that the kind of the shine is kind of worn off a little bit of Star Wars, the novelness of having this, is that they're probably going to have to deal with the real kind of Star Wars fatigue. But it's so strange that the way to deal with that is to bump your movie up 6 months. But hey, that's, as long as they obviously have a great idea what they're going to be, how they're going to be finishing this off. So they probably know better than me. The one thing I will say is, speaking of marketing movies, I'm sure you've seen this, and I don't know who exactly was it said this, but somebody on Twitter kind of made a kind of off the cuff comment that Episode 8 looks like it's just going to be a retread of Empire Strikes Back. And, there is things in the trailer that make you like little teases and things, and kind of expressing more of the dark aspects of Star Wars. And, of course, the big reveal at the end that at least what we understand is that Luke believes that the Jedi must end. Which I will say this. I listened to a few other shows this week, and I felt very vindicated that we were all kind of like, yeah. It could be it. It could have been anything. You never know how they edit it. It's like, I'm not the only person that kind of rolled my eyes a little bit and didn't get, and to be honest, didn't really get as excited from the trailer as they had hoped. So I didn't really make notes which show I was listening to, but I think basically everybody was kind of like, I'll believe it when I see it. But anyway, somebody was saying this, and Ryan Johnson, who is a active Twitterer, took exception with this, and I should actually get the the tweet. You don't happen to have it?
I do not.
Okay. Oh, what? It was basically. I'll just go to his Twitter. Hopefully it's still there.
I'm trying to do that now.
I'm sorry. I should have had this ready. Oh gosh. Oh yes. So basically, it was a conversation with Collider, and which is a very enthusiastic media company that they kind of do what we do on a larger scale. Basically, he said one tweet was, "They're just going to copy Empire, nothing new here," with a quote, with a picture, a GIF from Fight Club.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, nothing against Johnson. It's Disney that's controlling everything. And then Ryan Johnson says, "Hi, Greg. This is Ryan. I've actually had as much creative ownership as on any film I've done. Don't know if you'll like it, but it's me." So it was kind of like, what is that? It's like the GIF that goes around of the young kids doing the dozens, and the one guy kind of has his arms folded. I was kind of thinking that. But then in retrospect, to this guy Greg at Greg Burke 85's defense, why is the director of a major multi-$100 million photo jumping into the fray on Twitter?
Yeah.
Isn't this a little beneath an artist's or a director? Or maybe that's, am I wrong? Is this something that people that directors need to engage? I mean, I know a lot of people that kind of operate in this realm, say James Gunn, who's been doing the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. He's very free about being on Twitter. I don't think Zack Snyder is a Twitterer. I don't know. I don't follow him. It would be interesting to see. I don't think he got defensive about some of the accusations thrown about him. I guess my point is like, why, Ryan, why are you doing this? Don't engage. And I'm not going to call this Greg 85 guy a troll, because he's offering an opinion, not necessarily an opinion that's popular. But I don't think he was cruel about it. Didn't call anybody names. He wasn't using charged language. He was making a first blush response off of a trailer. So, is this where we are? Now where it's like we're engaging with critics. Maybe I'm saying that to cover my own butt, because I'm not shy about being critical. I do try to keep it off Twitter, just because I'd rather have people hear the show, and so they could get a full context of my complaints rather than 140 characters. Because I feel like Twitter is always a poor place to get your ideas across.
Right.
But what's your take on this? Do you think that Ryan?
I mean, on the one hand, sorry.
No.
Interrupt.
On
the one hand, if he was like, I've had more creative, input or control on this movie than anyone I've ever done, right? He's kind of combating the narrative that, Disney is going to sanitize everything, and, they're not going to want any interesting creative decisions. So I could see, I guess I would say in general, his engaging with people on Twitter, Disney and Lucasfilm probably see it as a net positive, and particularly in this case, given the specifics of what he was doing. But I'm kind of with you, like, just get off Twitter, right? Like, not everything is worth responding to. Don't lower yourself to, how many people is he going to like search out tweets about? They're saying, "Oh, it's just going to be another Empire Strikes Back." Yeah, you can't be everywhere. You can't. Some of that stuff you just have to let go and be like, and just kind of to yourself say like, "Yeah, well, they think that now." Just can't wait for them to see the movie, and just let all that go, because people are going to say that stuff regardless. And now you've shown a willingness to engage, and so that means people might be, trying to provoke future reactions. So on the one hand, I think in general his engaging on Twitter is fine, but just don't, in this case, just don't, just let it go.
Yeah, and I've actually left out the other tweet that Ryan did. And it was as Greg is right. Actually, I've spent the last 3 years just copying Empire, and it's kind of like, I think that quote to me, the kind of the sarcastic thing, it almost made me feel like it raises more questions than answers. It makes me think, well, was he a little disappointed with the reaction to the trailer, the teaser, this idea that, he'd obviously put a lot of effort into it. He's really excited. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know he's a guy who before he became, when he was still around, he'd done Looper and stuff like that. He was actually very apt to engage with people on Twitter. So it's not like a thing where all of a sudden now he's gotten a thing, but I don't know if he ever sat around and defended, defending a trailer or a teaser that he didn't probably have much to do with, and probably can't say that because it might look like, well, it's not really the tone of the movie or whatever. I mean, I'm speculating, but again, it's that thing where it's like, is he, Mark's kind of that thing that came out on Nightline, which I mentioned last week, and I put a little piece of it on at the end of last week's episode, where Mark kind of talks about his fundamental I have fundamental problems what you do with my character, but if you listen to the whole thing, he turns it around and says, but I was wrong about The Force Awakens, blah, blah, blah. I wonder if maybe that has been like a little kind of, maybe that's kind of stings a little bit, and because it is kind of, it feels Disney, and George was the same way, I think, or Rick McCallum, who was really the voice of the prequels when they were in production. He would downplay any, like, everything's going as we've foreseen. Of course we're going to do reshoots because we've always done reshoots. In some ways, McCallum was covering up that, things like, we don't have a whole third act of the movie, kind of, let's put in a droid foundry thing that has no bearing on the story or whatever. But I guess, in 2002, people didn't walk around with a window into the world in their pocket, so you could kind of get away with this kind of light, kind of like, everything is proceeding as foreseen or whatever. Idea. And again, in a world where trying to explain yourself on social media can only, in my opinion, add to the confusion. You know what I mean? It's like at this point, unless you're putting something out there on a sheet of paper and taking a picture of it with a notary's name next to it and then putting up the picture, tweets are always going to be kind of like misconstrued. Even I, am immediately taking that Rian Johnson's being a little too defensive about this, because obviously I'm part of this cottage industry out of taking little threads and bits and bobs of Star Wars and trying to, comment on it. Maybe I'm taking it a little personally, even though it wasn't directed to me. I wouldn't want to get into a Twitter beef with Rian Johnson, but
yeah, no.
I just like the fact that he used to, on my old, I think it was my old Twitter, that he had favorited some jokes I had made. So I like that. I'll keep my interactions with Rian Johnson to that.
I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing for someone like Rian Johnson to do. Just like the things, favorite the things you like, or retweet some praise or whatever, and then just let everything else run through. And
and like, again, I had said last week that it honestly felt that maybe Ryan was trying to channel a little bit of that J.J. Abrams kind of enthusiasm and engagement with the fans, and I think he does it with a maybe doesn't have the same skill set about interpersonal stuff, even though he went out and basically someone said that he was signing autographs the night before that panel for 4 hours doing selfies, which I think JJ just brought him pizza. So I mean, it's not a thing where it's like an indictment of Rian Johnson as a person. I think some people are more comfortable being that gregarious. I mean, Gareth, I honestly always felt that Gareth Edwards, the director of Rogue One, was a little bit uneasy with it too. But I don't think that affected the movie. I mean, I think he was very deft in kind of, sidestepping concerns about whether or not there was a much better movie on the cutting room floor, which I don't believe is true at all.
Right.
So, again, my takeaway is a little bit that this might be him smarting from that combination of some soft reaction to the teaser and maybe Mark kind of in his own way kind of trying to be fun about it. I don't think Mark was like going in those comments saying like, we've got a problem here and I'm appealing to the fans. I think it was just his way of like, hey, this is how, like, again, I think you brought up last week, he's not like Harrison Ford. He didn't get a say in the script. He doesn't get to rewrite his dialogue. He doesn't get to decide where his character goes. He's not that kind of actor. He's also not that kind of level of star, to be honest. So
right.
I don't think Mark meant anything by it. And I don't, maybe I'm reading way too much into Rian Johnson just having some fun, especially since, he is pretty apt to engage with people on Twitter. It's not like he all of a sudden broke the veil and came out and like,
right.
I don't usually speak to fans, but this is a problem and I'm going to talk it, but whatever. But then again,
so there's yeah.
Please continue. I was
no,
talking in circles.
I was going to move to something else.
Yes,
which
please.
Is
I'm talking in circles now.
Related, but another thing that is on Rian Johnson's Twitter, which was news to me that I just learned just now when we looked it up. So the word was that he wrote and directed episode 8 and then wrote episode 9, but apparently that's not really the case. So on IMDb, he's listed as writing the story treatment for episode 9. And so someone on Twitter asked him, hey, you're listed as writing the story treatment for episode 9. Is that outdated information or have you been working on it? And he basically said, yeah, that's old information. I haven't really written anything for episode 9.
Wow.
So that's a change from at least what I know, and probably other people who don't trawl through the IMDb pages. I had been assuming up until today that Rian Johnson was writing episode 9.
That was a big selling point when they were talking about it, that there would be, a lot of people.
Continuity and So instead, it looks like episode 9 is being written, or has been written, if there's already a table read, to a certain extent, by Trevorrow, and then Derek Connolly, who was his writing partner on both Safety Not Guaranteed and Jurassic World. Or I guess writing partner is maybe inaccurate. Derek Connolly was the credited writer on Safety Not Guaranteed, and then on Jurassic World he was, I'm guessing, one of several writers. One of 7 people with some kind of writing credit on Jurassic World. He also has a writing credit on Kong, Skull Island. He also has a writing credit on something called Monster Trucks, which I encourage people to find this either on Wikipedia or on IMDb and read the summary, because this is this may be riff tracks at some point in the future, just based on the description and the names of the characters. Tom Lennon's in it, though. Is this supposed to be a comedy, or is this like?
Yeah, it's a kid focused. It's a kid focused CGI anime. It's like My Mother the Car, but
it's like a monster truck, but it has tentacles coming out of it.
Yeah.
And it says on January 13th, meet Creech. This came out 2016, and this is the first I have heard of it.
Well,
anyway.
Ironically, a friend of the show provided me with a digital copy of the film, but I've yet to watch it, though. I was kind of... I think he sent it as a gag, and he underestimated my appetite for free films. That doesn't mean I'm going to watch it the first week, but anybody wants to send me free redeem codes for digital copy, I always accept.
Well, now it's officially Star Wars Episode 9 research for you.
Yes. So now this weekend I will I am going to make the listeners a promise. I am going to be watching Monster Trucks On probably April 27th, I will meet Creech, or April 28th.
Right.
It's a Friday, so we'll rotate this into my Friday night movie viewing, and I will report.
And what do you bring to that meeting? You bring like a bottle of wine? Do you just bring flowers? What do you bring when you meet Creech?
Anything's possible, man. Anything's possible. You don't want to be stuck in a you don't want to be stuck in a zone and then find out Creech is more of a motor oil guy or something from the Cthulhu dimension, or I don't know.
Right.
It's going to be interesting. I'll probably be eating pizza because I usually am eating pizza. So
if you want to offer some to Creech, who turns down pizza?
Just a little bite. Hey Creech, just give him a little nibble. Come on. Yep. Just a little bite. But so it's movies like Jurassic World and Kong: Skull Island, have so many people contributing to the scripts, and taking passes at stuff and doing script doctor work and whatever, that who knows what his contribution was to those. But in terms of safety not guaranteed, I think both of us are on the record as thinking like, well, it's pretty good. We liked it enough. So whether that's encouraging. Wait. What thing did you say you liked well enough? Safety
not guaranteed.
Oh, yeah. For some reason, I thought you said Jurassic World, and I'm like, wait a second. No, I did enjoy it.
And I will say, I was almost tempted to go see Kong Skull Island, but I kept thinking because I kept reading decent reviews of it and people on Twitter saying like, oh, it's good. And I kept thinking, that's a trick. You're trying to trap me into going to see this dumb, bad King Kong movie, so I'm not going to fall for it. But we both think safety not guaranteed. Yeah, it was pretty good. We liked it well enough. So who knows how that will translate over to the Star Wars movie? But so that is all a long ways of saying Rian Johnson is no longer really involved in the writing of Episode 9.
It's interesting though. It's like it's almost like they've replicated the original trilogy in a strange way, in the fact that by the time they get to Episode 9, it's not terribly different than Episode 6 in the fact that it's almost like a factory operation. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, I referred to previously, but even in the writing directing thing where it's like, oh, it's more of a committee situation. There's been, Jedi had the change from, Gary Kurtz had left and Howard Kazanjian had come on, and it's well established that Lucas had kind of maybe at the time had made a decision. Well, we all know he had personal issues going. He decided to kind of lean more into the idea that he was making a kind of a movie to sell toys or for kids. I don't know. It makes me wonder, like, when they get to a director who, again, I keep on acting like somehow Trevorrow is a step down from Rian Johnson when, Jurassic World was huge. It was, you can't underestimate how much money that movie made. Although Michael Bay movies make huge amounts of money, and I wouldn't want him within 10 feet of a Star Wars film. And I actually, on some level, enjoy a good Michael Bay film, much like I'm sure I'll enjoy aspects of monster trucks.
Right.
I enjoy the visceral experience of watching something that's morally bankrupt, but whatever. But yeah, no, that's a very interesting kind of, I mean, maybe losing Carrie exacerbated them having a finalized script much earlier in the timeline of production than they thought. You know what I mean? It's like, maybe he had signed on with an idea for 8 and thought, well, we'll get to 9 when I'm done with 8. Well, now that they're 6 months ahead of schedule, apparently, there is a writer's strike looming, which we had talked a bit before we started recording about. We're not actually experts in that, so we don't know what that would entail for Star Wars. It might have a lot more to do with productions in the future, say spin-off movies or animated series, whatnot. So, maybe they just had to make some decisions like, well, we have to deal with this Carrie thing. now, which makes me wonder. It's like, was Ryan Johnson part of that think tank that they did back in February, March? I don't know. We never really got a follow up on that. I mean, we do know that they, and I guess, did we talk about the fact that Carrie's not going to be in 9 in any way, shape, or form? Okay, we did.
We did.
Yeah. So, it's a really interesting time as far as, the creative pieces of the puzzle kind of being moved around. And, I wish I could go into into the future and grab that tell-all book that's probably never going to get written now because it seems like they're moving away from that. But I really kind of want to know, what was happening behind the scenes of this time. Was it kind of more matter of fact than we really think it is? Were they kind of shitting bricks? It's that kind of, I don't know. Is that terrible to say that it's almost become more interesting than the movies themselves? Oh gosh. On a Star Wars podcast, I shouldn't say that.
Well, but it's understandable, right? That's kind of what we have to talk about, and I think at this point, or at least after Episode 7 and Rogue One, I think there is this kind of feeling that, like, yeah, they'll be good, right? Like, they'll be pretty good. There will be varying degrees of, like, interesting, cool stuff in them. So far, I don't think either movie has really hit it out of the park. To use a sports metaphor involved, for Star Wars, I think both movies had, good points and bad points. But on the whole, like, on balance, like, yeah, these are fun and they're good. They're made pretty well. So I think, there's a sense of, like, okay, we kind of maybe, again, the Han Solo movie is maybe a wild card, but, we sort of know that, there's at least a baseline level of quality with these. And so beyond that, like, the real interesting, juicy stuff is, all of this other aspect of it.
Exactly.
And part of that, I think too, is as another thing we talked about a little bit before we started recording was we have this writer's strike coming up. This Writers Guild of America looks like they're headed for a strike, which means that while they're striking, no one who is a member of the Writers Guild of America can do anything. So if they need reshoots on this Han Solo movie, I guess, or if they have Lucasfilm has other future movies in development that, those might have to get put on hold for a little while. And so that, then you start thinking about, like, well, what is that? How does that affect this kind of release schedule and their kind of grand 10-year plan or whatever it is that they have going on? And how might that affect the Star Wars that we get? I mean, I guess you were saying that there's kind of an exception for, like, if you're the executive producer of something.
Well, that's how
you can kind of get around this union strike rule, which is how you were saying that's how, like, Conan and Stephen Colbert were able to, like, keep their shows on the air even though they were members of the WGA. It's because, well, they were the executive producers of the show, so it wasn't quite the same. And so, maybe Lord and Miller are able to get around that in the same way on the Han Solo movie, if need be. I mean, who knows how long this strike is going to go on and if it's going to affect anything at all. I guess.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I don't even know what the actual points of contention are on this strike, and I assume this is the same group, the same union that was striking during when Conan and all the late night shows kind of went to more of had to go to kind of an extemporaneous show for a couple months. I assume this is the same group. I don't know anything about what they're negotiating for, but I always thought that there was some kind of, if you wrote, I don't even know how it works, because I don't think it's a situation where you could take a script that somebody else, a guild member, wrote, and I don't think you can change it. I don't think you're even allowed to change a line of dialogue. That's considered writing on the script. So if they can't prove, if you have dialogue in the movie, it's like, and you can't prove that it was, wasn't improvised, or I don't even know if improvisation counts as writing, and then you have Actors Guild people scabbing on the Writers Guild. Technically, when the actor's writing is improvising, they're technically writing, so is that a violation? I mean, I don't think there's a lot of improv in Star Wars movies. I don't know. It's like, if by this time I assume Rebels Season 4 has been scripted and it's just over in being animated overseas right now, so I don't think that would affect anything. I don't honestly know what the production schedule of a show like that is, but if he's working on an untitled animated or live action whatever, I don't know if it's a situation where he has to be the only person who writes it to be able to sidestep that problem, or I don't know. I mean, the only other time I've ever heard of like an executive producer writing the bulk of a series is that J. Michael Straczynski, who has he's written movies for Clint Eastwood and stuff like that, but he really made his bones as a television writer, and he's known as the guy that created Babylon 5. And I guess he wrote one season. He wrote like 90% of the series, like every script for one like the third season of the show or whatever. And I don't know if that was a dodge for a strike or something, but that's the only other example I've ever heard of someone taking on episodes and episodes of television writing and producing. So it'll be interesting if this affects Star Wars, but I don't know. I mean, sometimes with these strikes, they come in with a last minute thing, and then it kind of they are able to avoid it. I know that there was a voice artist strike for video games, and I honestly don't know if that's actually still even in. I don't know. Did that voice artist strike end?
Oh, I know.
No, it was still going.
Still going on?
I think it's still going on. At least it was going in October, December. No, it looks like it might have ended. I'm sorry, listeners. Anyway, the first pick.
So it looks like it looks like it might still be going on because I have not seen anything about a resolution. Yeah, SAG-AFTRA.
That goes off in June or something. Anyway, so there's a lot of labor negotiations going on in the movie and video game industry right now, which, Disney must feel pretty comfortable if they've already put forth a date and it's actually 6 months earlier, or maybe they're getting all their ducks in a row so they don't have to deal with it if it does happen. So again, I'm no expert on labor relations, but it kind of, I found it a little interesting. Also, as far as like stuff in development, now I didn't know about this until you put it in the notes that there's pitch meetings going on from this guy. Oh God, I've lost his name again.
Sam Esmail.
Sam Esmail, known for
the guy who created Mr. Robot.
Yeah, which I have not picked up.
I have not seen either.
People say it's really good.
But I guess if they bring him in, then we might get Christian Slater in Star Wars.
Really?
But isn't he in Mr. Robot?
Yes, he is. But he was in Star Trek, man. We don't need. He's already gotten his cameo. He's got a one-line cameo, and
he has to do the both.
You have to pick a side.
He has to get the.
You have to pick a side. Why am I saying that?
I'm trying to think of who might have done both.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. I bet if
I'm sure there are a lot of
JJ. How about that? We'll just leave it at JJ.
Sure, the elephant.
Well, technically, you could say what's his name? Oh, who's the redheaded guy? The actor that played Unkar Plot, and he plays Scotty.
Yeah. He's written all those movies.
Somebody's in their mid-30s now.
Oh, I'm sure a lot of people are yelling at us right now.
That guy. It's not Nick Frost. It's the other one. Oh God.
Yeah.
Let me just grab the dang DVD, and then I can save us the trouble. It's my hot copy of Simon Pegg.
Thank you.
Thank you, Blu-ray.
Yeah.
I think that's why that's why you get kids, keep your physical media around, because eventually your brains.
Apparently, Simon Pegg also provided the voice of Dengar in 2 episodes of the Clone Wars.
Yes, I remember some people had, because famously he had kind of bashed the prequels in Spaced, him, and when the early TV show, he had his character. Mm-hmm. Had a thing about the prequels, and he continued on to his life, and so some people really questioned why a guy who hated the prequels got to be in the Clone Wars, which I thought was like, oh, come on, because he's a famous actor, man. What do you want?
Yeah.
But so this Mr. Robot seems to be the only thing he's known for. So. As a writer, he's written 32 episodes of Mr. Robot, so that's kind of, I mean, he must be, no, he's not that young of a guy.
So he had 2 movies come out in 2014, of which he was the writer, one of which he was the director. He was only the writer, not the director, on something called Mockingbird, a found footage horror film. Remember those when that was a thing to do? And then Comet was his directorial film debut, starring Emmy Rossum and Justin Long. After meeting by chance at a meteor shower, pessimist Dell and insightful Kimberly begin a 6-year journey through a relationship that blossoms and fades over time. The movie is shown through glimpses of parallel universes and flashbacks that are not chronologically ordered, showing the viewer the progression and depression of their intricate relationship. So again, remember when people made those kinds of movies about like, here's a relationship, but we're not going to show it in chronological order.
Right.
Yeah. So that is this guy, Samus. And who knows whatever else he has sold to studios or anything.
And then his bio is kind of, I mean, IMDb is kind of an odd little place to put your bio, but they have like trademark, quadrant framing, dreamlike settings.
Yeah. So according to Wikipedia, in a BBC interview, he said, quote, "I tend to write about alienated figures who can't connect with others and who are kind of distant from American culture. It's not something I'm consciously doing, but it's something that happens to be infused inside me because of my experience growing up in America." So, if you substitute American culture for, like the Empire, or who knows, maybe even the New Republic, something, you could see just that idea of, alienated figures who can't connect with others and are kind of distant from the prevailing culture. You can probably get a Star Wars movie out of that.
Well, I think you're burying the lead. I think he's cluing us into who he's thinking about. I think he's doing a Lobot movie.
Oh, I was going to say Kitster.
Kitster, no, I'm tired of Kitster jokes. That guy just wants to be left alone. No, it's Lobot.
No, I know, but like the character of Kitster, you could easily see him being alienated from society.
Exactly. It's like I had it. It's like,
But yeah, what would a Lobot movie look like? It would have to be, because presumably you're not going to have Lando in there,
Mr.
Right?
Lobot to you. It would be like I don't know. Maybe they could do that. They oversold the heist aspects of Rogue One a little too much, because they kept on like referring like, oh, it's kind of like an Ocean's 11 kind of thing. It's like, well, maybe they could do like a casino on Cloud City and a heist with like oh boy, this could take place right before Empire. Lando's maybe off on a business trip. Or you could get Donald Glover to come in and do it, depending on his Lando, if it's good or not. And
if he wants to do it more than once.
Exactly. And I guess I call it his Lando. I'll be honest, there only really is one Lando. But
I'm willing to reserve judgment on Donald Glover's Lando.
I'm just
Billy
speaking.
D. Williams is Lando Calrissian.
I'm just speaking for Billy D. Billy D. said it anyway.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it could be like the what do you call it, the bounty hunters? Because that's my whole thing is that's the if they're gonna do like these standalone movies, kind of like Rogue One, where it's, which I mean, again, I don't want to pick on Rogue One. There is when you really look at it with a critical eye, story-wise, there's a superficiality to it that's even more so than the numbered Star Wars film. Like a lot of the stuff that people take away from it is more implied than actually executed. Still enjoy the movie, don't get me wrong, but I'm judging it outside the realm of Star Wars.
Right.
You could almost, if we already know that even if it's a little superficial, it can still be successful. So, people go like, well, how exciting would be a movie about, 7 bounty hunters? It's like, well, you could, you could kind of keep it gritty like Rogue One and have, your 4-LOM, your Zuckuss, your Dengar, your IG-88, although I bet you nobody really wants to figure out how to do make a CGI IG-88 work.
Oh, I don't think that would be too hard. I mean, if they did K2SO,
well,
I don't think IG-88 would be
just the
difficult.
idea that his legs are stiff or whatever. But I mean, was he in the?
Yeah.
I guess he was in the Clone Wars. I need to go back and revisit. I keep feeling
they have set up in the Aftermath books. They have set up this idea that Dengar and some of the other bounty hunters are setting up not quite a bounty hunting guild, but they're going to try to organize the bounty hunters within the New Republic government, to get contracts and things like that. So that is a possibility, and maybe it's Dengar rather than Boba Fett that becomes the focus, or
because you wouldn't
remember
really...
the name of the Zabrak lady from Aftermath.
Oh, I didn't read it, so I don't remember.
Yeah.
Oh, I only read the first one, didn't I?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that honestly, I feel like that could work. Especially with a guy this Sam guy. He sounds like he's comfortable writing about technology and, computers, and it could be some kind of heist movie with a bounty hunter. That idea which kind of explains, why are all these guys on the bridge of the Star Destroyer? I mean, I know they've done it in comic books and video games where, I think it was the Shadows of the Empire comic where it kind of made this idea that a lot of people were ticked at Boba Fett, that he had said oh yeah, we're all going to work together. And then he kind of did a deal on the side with Vader and went to Cloud City. But, I think it could be kind of fun. And especially, a lot of people go, hey, Rogue One, it's like the first Star Wars movie that if you're not really intimately educated on Star Wars lore, you're kind of at a loss. And I feel like, well, you could these standalone movies are perfect for doing that in some ways. It's like where it kind of rewards the audience and for knowing, so they wouldn't have to make it they could kind of almost, I know it's funny to even say this, they could make it as kind of superficial and more action. It's like, again, any of the superficiality I complain about in Rogue One is far outweighed with the excitement of the space battles and the way that they did these thinly drawn characters and made you care about them in a way that was kind of unique, which is it's kind of weird for them not to, in some ways Cassian was a really, everything is only hinted at. It's like, oh, he's killed people before with, to get out of trouble, or he's been in the fight since he was 6. And it's like, even with that little sketch, people cared when he died, and it was, at least within the Star Wars realm, I feel like, if you're just going to do this and try to market it to lay people that don't watch Star Wars, you could have a big goose egg on your hands, and people are like, well, I watched this movie, and it's 2 hours of these ugly-looking bounty hunter things running around. But I think Lucasfilm is kind of in that area where they can kind of, they can still make the big movies and that have to appeal to a wide swath, and then they can do more specialized, but who knows?
Yep. And I would say too, if they don't want to, if they are making a Boba Fett movie, which there's no guarantee that they are, but if they don't want to overdo the bounty hunter stuff, this idea from an outcast from society, maybe that reads like the Obi-Wan Kenobi movie that has been talked about. Maybe that reads like a Kanan Jarrus movie, right? That picks up where his backstory in the comic left off, after Order 66, and he met up with what's his name, on the planet, and they did some stuff. I know I'm being very specific, but the young Kanan Jarrus movie before he joined up with Hera. Maybe you could do a Hera movie. There are lots of different ways. Maybe it's a whole slate of new characters. I mean, maybe that's the thing with Rogue One. They've decided, this proves that audiences are open to new characters, and so they just focus their attention on creating new characters from now on. I would also say that studios like this take pitch meetings with lots of people.
True.
There's no guarantee that he is actually going to. There's no guarantee that anything is going to come of these pitch meetings with the Mr. Robot guy. But I will also say that I'm sure they've taken pitch meetings with lots of people, and his is pretty much the one name that we've heard at this point. And much like the Woody Harrelson casting and the Donald Glover casting, we didn't really, I guess, aside from the Han Solo, Alden Ehrenreich casting, where we heard, several different names, and then, down to the one, for the most part, when these things are kind of rumored, that it ends up being that person, right? So, there's a rumor that they're considering Donald Glover, and then a couple weeks later they announce, it's Donald Glover.
Yeah, it's like that's the final vetting.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the fact that I'm sure of the many pitch meetings that they've taken over the last several years, that his is kind of the name that we're hearing, that maybe there is something to this.
Speaking of rumors, and we haven't even brought this up, so this is kind of you might not even know this. Have you been seeing these rumors about Rosario Dawson wanting to play a live action Ahsoka?
Yeah,
and that Dwayne Johnson wants in on some Star Wars thing.
Oh, I hadn't seen that.
Yeah, that one doesn't seem to have as much legs to it. I haven't found a lot of corroborating stuff apart from some gossipy thing. But the Rosario Dawson thing, I think it's on her Twitter. She's talked a lot about how she wants to play this live action Ahsoka character, which it kind of goes to show you that it's like, well, I mean, I don't know how is she into this cartoon? Does she kind of know where Ahsoka is at this point in the story, that, she may or may not be even a corporeal character in the Star Wars universe. It's kind of like, I don't know how much of this is just her professional lobbying for some kind of role that doesn't exist, or maybe she wants to play this character in hopes that they might open up be open to having her in some other role, maybe, because I know she has a relationship with Marvel, because she's on the Marvels, the whatever they call it, the Netflix universe of things like Daredevil and
right.
I haven't watched much more than
the Marvel TV universe. Is that what it's called?
I mean, I guess that technically fits into the movie universe. So I mean, she has a relationship with them. I'm definitely not a huge Rosario Dawson fan, so I'm not really I'm not even a huge Ahsoka fan, so I don't necessarily think that she warrants her own movie. I think she's fine I like what Dave did with her in Rebels. I mean, I'm not, most of my displeasure comes from the kind of her depiction in the Clone Wars, and although again, if you get to the end of that one, she has her thing where she leaves the Jedi Order. I like that, but I mean, the truth is that I honestly think if they were going to do something like that, which I honestly don't think they are, I think a lot of people would be ticked if Ashley Eckstein wasn't playing Ahsoka. And I mean, I know she's done up makeup and has cosplayed as Ahsoka, which is kind of a weird thing. You're cosplaying as the character you created. So, I mean, and I don't know. It's that thing where it's like, well, maybe voice acting is different than body acting, and I don't know. But I don't think I actually feel like maybe, this is just some wishful thinking on her part, that they would make a movie of this, and that and hopefully or maybe her hope is like, well, at least I'll get a part in episode 9 or something. I can be a warrior or a princess or First Order stormtrooper, whatever. Maybe it's kind of like the Sam Jackson thing where it's like if you just lobby hard enough and fans kind of go, yeah. But again, she's probably not necessarily like the kind of like fan. Although I kind of read on Twitter, it's like I didn't hear a lot of, aside from the like, I think Ashley Eckstein should be the first choice kind of thing. I haven't heard a lot of like negativity to the concept. So, maybe I'm just out in the weeds here, and I just thought, oh yeah, that doesn't really make sense to me. But then maybe it might to Lucasfilm. Who knows? But I don't think it's one of those things like you were talking about before, where they're already almost decided, and they're just. One of the last things they do is they throw it out there to kind of see if people are going to freak out in a negative way, or something's going to come out in the woodwork and they're going to go, you don't really want to hire this person. Because, I mean, like, the thing is, like, the Woody Harrelson thing, I think was pretty much a done deal. And the Alden Ehrenreich thing was before. And even by the time Tandy Newton had been announced for Han Solo, we'd already had a pretty good idea that she was in meetings for that. So again, I don't think that this is the same kind of way that Lucasfilm works. I think this is just her own personal appeal to try to get hook into the Star Wars magic while the going's good. And like any actor, you gotta sometimes you have to put yourself out there if you really want something.
Right.
I'm not going to necessarily be a champion of that, but what do we got next? We got should we dip into this?
How worked up do you want to get?
I don't mind getting a little worked up.
All right. Well, there are a couple different things we could go. So it is the 40th anniversary of Star Wars. We'll start there.
Okay.
Kathleen Kennedy was on another podcast recently. Another meaning one that isn't ours, not that she like goes on lots of podcasts, and this was just another one. But she was on a podcast recently. She was interviewed, and she was asked whether we the public would ever see the original trilogy, theatrical cuts, the initial versions, not the special editions. And she basically was like, no, that I don't think I could ever do that. They belong to George. And I don't know whether she meant just kind of in the sense that like they're his movies, it's not my say whether they can be released, or whether she means specifically like, well, he has the rights to them, or some combination of the two, right? Both literally and figuratively, they belong to George. So basically she's saying that as long as she's in charge anyway, she's not going to be the one to release the theatrical versions, the original releases of the original trilogy, which, I mean, I think a lot of people kind of knew. People occasionally say that there are rumors that they might get released, that, who was it that said there's like a 4K? Was it Ryan Johnson who said there's like a 4K, or Gareth Edwards? So there's a 4K version of, the original print of A New Hope somewhere out there.
Yeah, I think
so there's speculation periodically, but this should, I would think, although who knows how these things work. This should, I would think, tamp down pretty much all speculation for a while that this is going to happen.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm still bummed about it. I honestly don't understand this posture that they take. I mean, I've read enough George Lucas biographies to kind of understand why he isn't down with it. He tends to, like to create his own mythology, in situ, as they say, or whatever. It's like he's like constantly massaging his own legacy and mythology about Star Wars. I mean, I'm not going to call the guy an outright liar. It's just that he fudges the details, how things were, how much of it was presupposed and how much of it was, his writing was problem solving or whatever. But, this idea that he's completely for Kathleen to say, I would never touch George's movies. Well, isn't it by the argument would be that, like, well, one, he's disavowed those, so why is it hurt? That kind of thing where it's like, well, yeah, those, if the movies that I'm getting on, on iTunes or whatever are his preferred vision, right up to the fact, 5 years ago he added that extra rock in front of R2D2 because it's been, for some reason it didn't bug him in 97, but now it bugs him, and whatever. But it's just a thing that's like, it's such a, in some ways it's such a minor thing to ask for that, I understand that they don't want to confuse people by necessarily doing a large scale, thing where it comes back to theaters and it get, because, of course, if it came back to theaters this year, it would all of a sudden the think tank stuff, the think pieces about, how much where Star Wars is now, and like, people would probably me like, oh, well, everything past these movies has been a mistake, or, I'm sure there'll even be, I bet you anything now that, the kids that grew up with the special edition as being their only way is like, there'll probably be think pieces saying like, I don't see what all the hubbub was about. I don't feel like the changes were bad, but just to kind of like, I don't know, that Lucasfilm kind of almost kind of attitude that like it's in bad taste or a disrespect to George Lucas to even ask about them. That just gets my hackles up so much, because it's really a simple thing to ask. Put it out every time a new format comes out. Make it an option. Make it an extra. Make it make it a thing where it's like we're only going to release this for it's only going to be out in 6 months. Or for 6 months, and you have to order it from the Disney store, and every movie comes in a book, and it's and it comes out, and it's $50. It's like, and it's a prestige format. I just don't understand why they have this problem with people having, because I mean, it's that whole thing where they talk about the movies in the National Archives that are considered historically significant to America, the artistry of American life, the great directors, great painters, great musicians. They keep these things. They wouldn't take like, Bob Dylan's, Highway 61 Revisited and have him go like, oh, I just want to, like, that's great, thanks for keeping me. Can I just overdub the bass? I had a falling out with the guy that played bass on that, and we're going to remove his bass. Well, then you're not having, like, it's not a historical document. And I feel like it's important for that to exist in some. Now, I understand they don't want to promote it because it might confuse. But again, it's that thing where, like, his answer, Lucas's answer when he still owned Star Wars, like, well, it's on VHS. Like, do you own a VCR? It's like, I do, but I'm like that. I have to have it, but it's, it's on a tiny 14-inch television in my basement. It's not a thing where it's like, you can really enjoy it and say like, hey, let's look where we've been 40 years on. This is where technology has come, or just the idea that I could enjoy something that the way it was the first way I enjoyed it. It's that kind of odd thing. And then, like, I don't know what criteria he sold Star Wars under. Maybe there's something legally speaking. It's like, I will sell this all to you, but you can't ever put out the original versions. And they definitely wouldn't tell you that because I think fans would be upset about it. Now, I'm again I'm speculating on speculation, but it just irks me to no end, this idea that I'm supposed to feel bad for just like, I just want a good copy of the movies I grew up with. I like them. They, again, like a piece of music when I watched them, and again, because I don't feel 100% comfortable watching like those Harmy editions, because one, it's technically a bootleg. Nobody's, none of the principals are getting any money from those. Now, that being said, I've had bootlegs of Star Wars films over time. It's not a big problem. But, also they're working with, video sources. They're constantly reassessing things where it's all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is Harmy 3.875 edition where, we changed the coloring of the cloud cars into a more of a brownish red than an orange red or whatever.
Right.
That they get into the minutia, because every time I've gone to like sites and go like, all right, I'm going to download one of these. It's like, it feels kind of dirty doing it, and two, it never feels like I know which version to get. Do I get this is the one that'll fit on a DVD, or this one is 39 gigs, and it's, again, sometimes even then you get people that make editorial decisions where they go, well, I changed everything back to the way it was, but I really like the shot when Han Solo goes down the alley and he looks and there's like 50 stormtroopers, so I left that in.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, well, what's the point? What's the point?
Right.
And I think when you allow lay people to do this, you create like this weird economy, which I know money isn't being exchanged, but it's like that thing where it's like, why don't you just do a good job and release it and do it because I bet you anything 90% of people don't care, and I'm the 10% that does. And I'm not, maybe that in the past Lucasfilm has over catered to that 10% where they kind of haphazardly released a very I would consider insufficient scan of the old Laserdisc in whatever the masters, and I have those, and it's like I have to, and they look terrible. They look utterly terrible. I've even to the point thinking like, maybe I should sell them because they were limited edition. Now they can sell. You sell your original trilogy disc, you can get up to like sometimes $200 for them on eBay.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh well, I could put that towards something else. But then I'm like, I don't want to. What if they never ever release it?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm starting to get to be more of the feeling. I used to say, no, they're just waiting for the right time. But, with things like what Kathy Kennedy's saying, it does make me realize that, and they're probably never, they're always looking forward, combined with at the end of the day, kind of, I was dissatisfied with the amount of 40th anniversary of that specific movie. How much the celebration actually dealt with that, although that has a lot to do, I think, with what the live stream chose to show and not show, because like I said, there was a pilots panel, there was other panels that probably were a little bit more celebratory. So I'm just looking at the Verizon live stream, but again, it irks me to like no end. It's like I'm not like angry, but it's just just give us what we want. Just give us, just give it in a. You don't have to. Before I was like, oh, deleted scenes, documentary. I'm willing to just concede. Just throw the movie. You don't even have to throw a menu on there. Just put it in the thing and it auto plays. Just allow us to have that, because it seems shame that, like, at least for A New Hope or Star Wars, on its 40th anniversary, a time when people could, a movie that changed cinema for better or worse, whatever, you can never watch it in as it was shown.
Right. In that format. Yeah,
you're always assessing it with something that's been changed several times over the last 40 years. And it's like to see, like, this is how people experienced it in the theater. And to take stock in that, I feel is important. Even if they only did it with A New Hope, I'd like put it on the table. I'd be willing to, like, they're only going to do it with A New Hope, and they do something because Fox owns it in perpetuity or whatever. I don't know how it all works out, but I don't know.
Yeah,
it bums me out, and now it becomes people. Lucasfilm almost kind of have a sneering kind of dismissive attitude towards fans that still want this thing. I'm not going to name any names, but it bugs me as a fan.
Yeah.
I don't even know. I mean, you're 9 years younger than me. Does it even matter to you at this point?
I mean, I think it matters for many of the same reasons you articulated, right? That this version of the movie that basically started the whole thing and made it so popular is gone, right? Essentially, and it will never be seen in like a good quality version again. That we're always going to get Jedi rocks or random CGI creatures that at this point, in the development of CGI, I mean, they didn't even they stuck out like a sore thumb then, and I'm sure they certainly do now.
Yeah, they do.
So to have that show up, it's like, oh well, this to try to get younger kids or anyone else to kind of understand why this was such a phenomenon. I mean, I guess you could argue that the core of the movies are still there, and that they didn't change a lot of the stuff that are what made it such a phenomenon. But the totality of the experience will be different, and can't be recaptured. Now, I mean, I'm probably less disappointed than you are, if only because I had a lot lower expectations. Like I've been essentially taking George Lucas and Lucasfilm at their word that, like, yeah, they think the special edition that's the movie now, and so why would they release these other versions? And so I'm not super surprised. That doesn't mean I like it, but I'm not as bummed out, I think, just because I never expected them to do that. At least until after he dies, maybe. And even then, depends on what his will says, depends on what his kids say, his estate of George Lucas, what they stipulate. So
right. And I
think just for that reason, I'm not as like bummed out about it.
I don't want to ever get in a scenario where I'm hoping George Lucas dies so I could get something, but
right.
That's not my point. And I mean, I think the best example of like kind of like, they made a couple years ago they reissued King Kong, the original King Kong, and they did this in tandem with Peter Jackson's really bad King Kong remake. And right. One of the things I was like, that movie, it's one of those things where it's like, I think when it come out in the 30s, you look at it and it's like, it doesn't necessarily, it never worked for me, because I was a kid and I'd already seen Star Wars by age 4. So going back and looking at a kind of a strange stop motion gorilla, it never captivated my imagination. But one of the things that, because it had been chopped up a lot, it had suffered a similar fate to Star Wars in that over time it had been chopped up. Well, one of the things that either got lost or was never finished, I think it was more of, is this spider pit sequence. And Peter Jackson went to extremes to recreate this spider pit sequence that he always wanted to see. And when he finally did it, it looks pretty good. And there's like a huge documentary on the bonus discs for this, and it's fascinating. And I think it was a worthwhile experiment, even if his take on King Kong didn't work for me. Now, if they would turn around and like add that spider sequence to the regular King Kong DVD and then go, we're never going to release it without this thing that was created 70 years later. To me, it's just like, even though George had his hand in it all, I don't know. I'm going to stop talking about this. The only thing I will say is that if again, George is not always the best steward of his legacy. I mean, apparently there was rumors going around, and this is a deep rumor type stuff, so grain of salt, whole shaker. That I had heard, and I can't cite the source, is that it got to the point when they were going to release it on Blu-ray that he was actively talking, like doing cost analysis of how much it would cost to have replaced Yoda in the original in Empire and Jedi
CGI.
With the CGI thing, and just completely remove, so it's a thing where it's like he just never knew when to stop. in like him selling it, that's why I always think it's a good thing that he sold it, because it's like, I don't know, would he have, would he be right now at the 40th anniversary, would he be like adding even more stuff? So it's like, but my point is, as long as the originals were easy to access, they can put in whatever they want. They can put Mickey Mouse, they can put Pete's Dragon, they can put it in the, they can insert the planet from the Star Wars land. I just wish that I could, when if I'm like my nieces, the first time they want Star Wars, I had to drag out a VHS tape, just because I kind of wanted them, at least for that first movie, I wanted them to experience the closest to what I had. Now, I didn't sit there and bore them going like, now this is before George Lucas ruined it. I just grabbed the VHS and had them watch. But anyway, that's my take on it. My long ass boring take on it.
No, it's all right. But yeah, I mean, I think it's unfortunate, but this seems to be the world in which we live, in which we will not be seeing these theatrical versions for a while,
right?
If at all. I mean, I have to, never say never. I have to imagine at some point it'll happen, but not for a very long time. So this is the 40th anniversary, which also means 40th anniversary branded toys. And I think we probably talked about this when they were announced, but they're putting out, Hasbro is basically recreating the old Kenner packaging and the original line of figures, that these are like special collector's editions versions. And our own Robert is here to tell us more about it.
Yeah, so
apparently. You posted on Twitter, and they were like, "Well, so it begins."
So it begins, because I resisted this. Like I have these like rules, and I bored people with the story. Like I think I hit peak toy buying around Attack of the Clones, in the sense that at that time I didn't have a house, so I had a lot of disposable income, and I just kind of would go to Toys R Us and go like, okay, I don't have one of those, which ended up with like boxes and boxes of figures for a movie that's my least favorite Star Wars movie. And so what happened is it became this albatross that I eventually just like gave it. Anybody I knew that had a kid, hey, you want a bag of Star Wars figures? Because they literally at the time had no value. It was like, I was eBaying, looking at eBay, it was like $2 a piece or something. So I was like, I've always been wary. I don't want to get back into that stuff. But when this 40th anniversary thing came on, I'm like, some of them, for people that know, it's a black series. It's the 6-inch I don't even know how many. I'm not an articulation expert, but they have a lot of points of articulation. The arms, the elbows bend. They're very high quality, mass produced figures. So I've been avoiding them, but like I said, I bought a few for The Force Awakens, and I bought a few for Rogue One, and then I was like, oh, there's some Stormtroopers I like. So I was buying that, and I was like, okay. When they announced this 40th anniversary, I'm like, I'm not getting them because there's no way that you can display them. And my whole rule is like, if you can't what I did is to kind of lock myself into not being a guy who just has a lot of sealed boxes in his office. I was like, I have to open them up. So I take them out, and even for some of the Captain Phasma, and I had the Finn, I took the boxes and I threw them out. It was like, I can't, it's like, what's his face? Who was it when he reached the Americas and he burned his ships because he can't go back, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so I'm like, so I don't all of a sudden in a moment of weakness try to eBay them or whatever. Well, then this 40th anniversary thing comes on, and they hit the sweet spot, which is like you said, they try to replicate the original 12 figures, which is all your favorites: Han, Luke, Leia, the droids, Tusken Raider, Jawas, Death Star Commander, which is actually called Death Squad Commander, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, Darth Vader, and I think that's it. But that was like the original 12 or whatever. And so I was at Best Buy, which is an odd place to look at toys, but they had the Princess Leia and the Han Solo, and I kept hemming and hawing. I was like, am I going to do this? And I did. I jumped and I said, all right, I'm going to do this. So I went from that, and I will say the Princess Leia, I've never seen on a mass-produced toy such a great likeness of Carrie Fisher circa 1977, which kudos to Kenner, because they kind of got in trouble with the real collectors, which I don't consider myself, with a really unattractive face of hers. It's like does not have her likeness. It just seems like she has I don't know. You go Google it yourself, and you could say original sculpt Princess Leia, and they fixed it. Great paint application. I'm learning the terminology, so like all the paint apps is what they call it. And I got the Han Solo. He comes with like an extra set of hands with the gloves and the Stormtrooper belt, which is all great, but I'm never going to open it. I mean, that's the problem.
Right.
I'm violating my rule. So I was like, okay. And then I was at Target, and they had Luke. So I'm like, oh, I got the Luke. I did draw the line. I didn't buy the Darth Vader, and because of one of the things that Hasbro is doing is that they're doing their 40th anniversary version of the early bird set for people who know it. But that was when they actually sold you the figures before they had the figures, and then it was something for parents to give their kids on Christmas. And it was a little stand with a card, and it said, these are the figures you're going to get. And I don't remember how many of them actually came in the early bird set. It wasn't the full 12. So they do that, and that's the only way you can get the Vader. And it's, these things are $20 a piece already, which already puts my brain in like, oh, too expensive. But whatever. So I bought the Luke, but I didn't buy the Vader. One, because the box was trashed, and it's like, and I just happened to happen upon a vendor from Hasbro at the Target. I was like, and I said, do you have any more of these in your thing? She's like, no. And I'm like, and she was trying to encourage me to buy that because she's like, these are selling out like almost immediately, but I couldn't bring myself to spend 40 bones on something with such a damaged box. I mean, it was just beat. And it's like she knows I guess Hasbro is well aware that they are, people that are trying to take these and immediately flip them on eBay, which is kind of what the problem is right now. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to do all original 12 because it is that thing where I'm like, I had just kind of casually checked eBay when I was at Best Buy to see how much the Han Solo is, and some people were selling them for $40 and people were buying them.
Wow.
So it's like one of those things where, and we were talking before the show how like there was a write-up in one of the major newspapers of how toys have really kind of moved away from kids to, grown adults that are trying to, I'll be honest, trying to recapture a feeling from 40 years ago. And let me tell you something. I'm almost there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't mean to, I'm not trying to regress back to being 4 years old. But there is a certain like, I'll be honest, it's a little bit, I honestly don't want to be able to find these all in a month. One, I don't want to have to spend that money in a month. And two, it's like, there's a thrill of the hunt kind of thing. And they are really nice figures. That's the thing. I already got picky at GameStop, which, I know you're not a gamer. But GameStop, I don't know what's up with them. Maybe other people that listen to the show use GameStop. There's something about them that really irked me. You go in there, everything costs about 5% more, than anything else. Like I walked in, they had a Luke and they had a Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I could tell just looking through the thing, it had a problem. Like there was an extra piece of plastic hanging off his beard. So I was like, no, I'm not buying that. But I was like, well, they'd have price tags, which I will give them kudos. They did not put price tags on the card backs that, end up ripping the thing when you take it off, which Target as well. And the guy was like, I'm like, how much was it? Oh, it's $22.99. So it's like, to buy a Luke and a Obi-Wan, it would have cost me an extra $6. And then of course GameStop is the only place you can get the R5D4, which is the orange droid that blows up in front of the Jawa Sandcrawler. So technically, there's between that and the Celebration exclusive, which is Luke in his X-wing garb. There's 14 where some of them aren't coming out till June. So I'm not going to go. I can't get into those secondary market prices. But if I can complete my set, just going into like regular retailers and paying $20 a thing, I'm going to do it. But it's like they are nice. The funny thing is just before I had found the Luke and the Leia, I'd actually been in the mall shopping with my wife, and I stopped in at the Disney store, and they are liquidating their die-cast figures. So they were $26.99. Now they're going for $10.
Oh wow!
Which they're a different scale. They're 10 inches instead of 6.
Right.
And it's like I thought, I'll just buy because I've been kind of like bottom feeding and buying some closeout Star Wars stuff because like I said, Star Wars memorabilia ebbs and flows these days. It's like, yeah, in December it's premium prices, but if you go sniffing around April when Bed Bath & Beyond and Target is trying to liquidate, you can get some deals. That's how I got a Krennic Black Series at Walmart for like under $10, which I was really pleased.
News you can use.
Yeah, see, I've already broken my rule. It was like, I'm only going to buy stuff that's like costumes, like robots, because, they don't do the faces right. But then again, I found a Baze Malbus with a good painted face. I have yet to see a Chirrut Imwe in the wild. So it's so funny how, like, they don't want, I think what the lady from Hasbro kind of told me is they don't ever want to risk having these prestige figures kind of peg warming, as they say, because there have been a lot of Black Series that were peg warmers from The Force Awakens. Obviously the what's his name, Cap, what's the guy that you keep on saying you want to get one of?
Constable Zuvia,
which actually they finally have sold out of those. Now it's the Rogue One. You can get a Cassian Andor and a Jyn Erso for like $10 at Target right now. And honestly, I wasn't a huge fan of those. So I'm not a completist. So, you don't have to have an intervention on me yet. But it is that kind of thing where it's like, I don't come on here and complain about Star Wars, but there's some aspect to it. Still got me hooked. All you have to do is have like these toys and make them just right and just nice enough. And I'm a sucker. So I guess the takeaway is that if you don't want to do that kind of thing, don't start it. Don't think you can be like, I'll just get one. I'll just get 2. Because then all of a sudden you're like, oh boy, I'm going to do this, aren't I? And that's what I ended up doing. It's like, I'm going out for dinner tonight, and I'm probably going to hit the Toys R Us and maybe the Best Buy again. It's
right.
I'm not going to call it an addiction because I can stop whenever I want. Mm-hmm. But I will say Hasbro is doing a really good deal. I did see, again, I ran into that. I really wish I could just stay in the 6-inch thing, but I don't think they're going to do a Saga Rara yet. Because they aren't talking about it. One. And then they have, this thing called the Jetta Revolt, which is a 4-pack of the 3 3/4. And I almost bought it, but again, I was at GameStop, and instead of when the Blu-ray came out, they're like, it's if you come and buy your Blu-ray at Target, you can get the Jetta Revolt for $20. And I'm like, all right. I get 4 figures for $20. Well, of course they never had any, and they still haven't had any because I can't pick on people that are collectors because they're the ones that get up, and go in right when the store's opening on Monday and hit the people when they're stocking the shelves. And I never do. I'm way too lazy to do that. So, fortune favors the bold. But, yeah, they wanted $26.99 at GameStop for and I'm like, no, I don't need this. But they look great. My problem is like, where am I going to put these things? But, at least I'm not. At least I don't feel the need to buy 2 of everything and have one out, and I don't have the room for it. Everything is very much my deluxe display, which is in my office. Put a thumbtack into the wall, hang it from its punch out, and enjoy.
Yeah,
but it's a problem. It's a problem. So if everybody wants to send me Star Wars figures for free, please do so.
Yeah.
Again, I'm sorry. It's the second time I've appealed for free stuff on this show this week.
No, it's fine.
John, do you want anything for free? It's your birthday.
Yeah. I mean, a Chirrut Imwe, not the basic 3 3/4 because those don't look very good.
Not the basic bitch Imwe.
Yeah. Those Constable Zuvios, I'm still waiting for them to hit $6, and then I might pull the trigger. But, the Chirrut Imwe, not the basic 3 3/4 because those don't look very good. The kiddo, the Black Series. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not the basic bitch Amway. You know, those Constable Zuvios, I'm still waiting for them to hit $6, and then I might pull the trigger.
I
Yeah,
have been looking. I honestly have been searching for the churret for you for like months, and it's not going well.
Yeah, no, it's
up
fine.
to
it's not a huge need.
It's
I mean,
up to
the issue is me is that I have a couple of Lando figures now, and so anything I would add to that, like part of me is like, well, it feels weird to have like several different Landos and then just like a random, and then like Saw Gerrera or Chirrut Imwe or whatever. Like it kind of. I don't know that it makes that much sense.
It's funny. I don't.
But that's the thing. It's not like I'm going to be playing with them. Or
right.
Like I need my figures to tell a story when they're sitting on my desk or whatever. But it just it would feel weird to have like several different versions of Lando, and then like and then here's the Force Awakens Luke. You're like, all right, well, sure.
That's funny you should say it like that, because it's like I don't really subscribe to that philosophy, but your way of thinking is much more in line with real quote unquote collectors, because I was listening to people talking about there's this thing in collecting about like it's that problem, like you can't have it all. Well, some people do have it all, but some people have made the decision I can't have it all. And what they do is they do focuses. Like they have a Lando focus. I know a guy I talk to very frequently who has a Imperial Guard focus. That's his. He buys stuff that's not Imperial Guards, but generally, if something comes out with an Imperial Guard in red, that's going to be his first concern. And somebody else had said basically like, if you don't have a focus, I'm not particularly interested in looking at your collection. So it's like that's so indicative of how I collect, which is really poorly, and I don't have a focus. I'm very capricious. It's aside from that 12, which goodness knows if I'll get that 12. And the truth is like, even if I get the 12, I'm not going to spend the premium to get the other two. So if I have to spend $80 to get Luke and his Luke and his X-Wing thing, I'm not going to pay it. I know I'm not going to do that. But yeah, real collectors, I think they have a focus. They have a rhyme and a reason to the way they collect. So honestly,
they collect clone troopers, or they collect
Jedi. And like I said, I got the bays. And then I'm like, if I don't find a churret for myself, then I don't really care. But mostly I was just looking at on your behalf, and I know you're kind of like torn about it anyway. So it's like that thing where it's like, you mean you only have one of the group? I'm like, yeah, I kind of like I like Baze's gun. It's like that kind of, I have Krennic, but I'm not gonna. Well, I probably will buy the Tarkin. I do like the Tarkin that's coming out looks really good. It's like ugh. It's a sad thing, because it's like I'd much thought as I got older I would be much more Spartan with my stuff and be like, oh, I don't need all that. And it's like, I don't know. It's like it's almost like I don't know. I'm torn. Hey, people, talk me out of collecting stuff. Anyway, let's not talk about toys anymore.
All right. Well, let's talk about books. Let's move to books.
Yes.
So, Star Wars, from a certain point of view, which is a book that will be released, I believe, October 3rd of this year. This is so you and I have spent a lot of time, well, not a lot of time, but on more than one occasion, you and I have talked about those kind of anthology books from the mid to late 90s, Tales from Jabba's Palace or Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, et cetera, et cetera. And what those books were, it was kind of exactly what it sounded like. So a lot of the creatures that you saw in the Mos Eisley Cantina, it would be a short story kind of about how and why they're in the cantina and maybe what they were doing immediately before or immediately after. And by the time they got to... so that was the first one, and I think Tales from Jabba's Palace was the second one, and then they went back and did Tales of the Bounty Hunters from Empire Strikes Back. By the time they got to Jabba's Palace, they were pretty well integrating all of those different short stories so that they kind of told this kind of meta story as well about what life was like in Jabba's Palace at that point in time. And so this Star Wars from a certain point of view, it sounds like it's going to be something very similar, which is 40 short stories about background characters from A New Hope. And I want to say Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina maybe had like a dozen or so short stories. And so we're getting 40. So that we're getting not just from the Cantina, but, other parts of the movie as well. I assume maybe some rebel pilots or, Imperial folks, other folks living in Mos Eisley at that time. Who knows? Some of the 40 short stories. So they have 40 different authors or sets of authors because some people are writing in pairs. Some of these are folks who have written Star Wars novels or short stories in this kind of new canon era, or they've just written other Star Wars things. So Gary Whitta's writing one, but then Chuck Wendig, Christy Golden, E.K. Johnson, Alexander Freed, John Jackson Miller, Jason Fry, Paul Kemp. So folks who have been writing Star Wars stories recently, but then other folks too. Some names. Actually, in my others of note category here, I have Ben Acker and Ben Blacker, who apparently did write a Star Wars thing recently. It's some kind of, it's not a comic book, it's something else, but it was illustrated by Annie Wu, who's a really good artist. She works in comics and animation, and they wrote that. Anyway, but in addition to those kind of current Star Wars authors, you have folks like Mallory Ortberg, Paul Dini, who worked in animation for a while.
Paul did
Daniel
a lot
Jose Older. Sorry, go ahead.
No, Paul Dini did a lot of the writing for Batman the Animated Series.
Yep. Daniel Jose Older or Older, I'm not sure. Ken Liu, Meg Cabot, who wrote the Princess Diaries book. So we're getting a pretty broad spectrum of folks contributing to these. Which is interesting. And so, we had been saying too that like, we wish they would do more stuff like those Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina. And that's essentially what this is. I don't really know how to react because in some cases they may be, writing over or rewriting or kind of, erasing the previous kind of backgrounds and histories of some of those characters. Which is like, that's. I hope they don't do that. At the same time, I mean, those books were okay. They were certainly interesting for that period of time in Star Wars history. Star Wars kind of what's it called? Like
lore.
Yeah, but some of those stories were not very well written, and so it's like, all right, well, maybe if someone else takes another pass at this, maybe we'll get a better story. But I mean, so you and I have both talked about this. We both are fans of those things. So what are your feelings on this, Robert?
Well, I mean, it's funny because it's like, be careful what you ask for or what you wish for, because it's like, there's a few there's some good info, good signs here and some fun signs, but then there's some red flags. And this is going to sound very kind of, I don't know. The fact that it's a charity thing, it's not that I think charity's bad, don't get me wrong. It's just the idea that it's like, okay, this is to help an organization which is called First Book, and it provides new books, learning materials to educators. I mean, that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. But
yeah, absolutely.
I've always noticed anytime it's like that whole thing where they used to have all these benefit CDs out in the 90s and stuff. And it would always be like a band's B-sides or, that kind of thing where it was like a lot of filler, a lot of type of stuff. And I'm really hoping that's not what this is. With this incredibly 40 short stories. I mean, is this going to be in one volume? That's a lot of short stories. I mean, I would say that like some of those anthology books we're talking before, I mean, those are 12,000 word short stories, 20,000, sometimes very longish stories where they really get in depth. With 40 short stories, if this is in one book, and it's like, I'm almost feeling like the burden of being like, I get the feeling it's going to be a lot more experimental. Then they're not going to necessarily like say, you guys get to rewrite the Star Wars canon. Now, I hope they don't. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they are letting people. I mean, they're already starting to dip their toes into like that. Some of the stuff in the Battlefield games are going to be canon. So I don't know. Maybe they are kind of going back in the. I mean, it's nice to see that basically everyone here, even Gary Whitta and Chuck Wendig and John Jackson Miller, all these people, they all have a pedigree of having worked with Star Wars. I mean, but then you see like E.K. Johnson and Ashley Eckstein. It's like, oh, okay, well, she's not normally known as a writer.
Right. I assume that's going to be an Ahsoka story.
Yeah, and it's that
I guess it can't be. But what is it going to be?
Well, it probably has to be. But like I said, it's that kind of thing.
Well, but she's not in A New Hope unless they.
Oh, is that what they're
somehow say? Well, because my understanding was that this is stories about background characters from A New Hope, but maybe it's bigger than that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. They say basically, if you're a fan of desert-searching stormtroopers of the galaxy or scum and villainy hide gathered in a Tatooine watering hole, you're in luck, even if Obi-Wan might not believe you. I think you're right. I guess maybe this is. Okay. Well, like I said, I'm going to give it... I want to give it a...
More than 40 authors, this is the summary on Amazon. More than 40 authors have lent their unique vision to 40 scenes, each retelling a different moment from the original Star Wars film, but with a twist. Every scene is told from the point of view of a background character. So it's not even... I mean, it's similar because the Tales from Mos Eisley, they all had essentially the cantina scene, but, what they saw happening in the cantina scene. But I guess just stretched out over the entire movie. So you'll get Luke blowing up the Death Star, but again, from some other X-Wing pilot's point of view, what it looked like when Luke, which who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, now that you're telling me that these are more like sketches, that's kind of like, well, okay, whatever. But I guess maybe that kind of, I don't know why I didn't read that before, but this is almost kind of giving me like, oh, is this basically the Star Wars book version of movie 43? Oh, yeah. You're just going to get little bits and pieces. I mean, like, again.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with 40 people writing. I mean, are they going to, these things can't be 20 pages or else that's an 800-page book, so how much
space I don't think you're not going to get full stories, and it's... I mean, this isn't exact. I mean, like I said, I'll pick it up because it's for charity. It's going to be 400 pages, so 10 pages.
Yeah.
So, well, that's what they're saying.
Average.
That's what they're saying. I mean, I want to support. I mean, it sounds like a really good cause, and I love anything that promotes literacy. So, just that it's going to be a day one purchase for me, just to kind of support and just give it a fair shake. I will say on a personal note, I see there is a writer by the name of Mur Lafferty who I became familiar with about 10 years ago because she was actually one of the first podcasts I ever listened to.
Wow.
And she had a great podcast, and I don't know if I didn't keep up with it. I don't know if she still does it, called I Should Be Writing. And it was just kind of like this thing where she started out, and she was a struggling author who was trying to kind of, find her foray into getting her work seen. So it was a lot of like writing techniques, marketing techniques, conversations with authors. I mean, she was kind of into new media when people were podcasting, like they would podcast their novels as an audiobook as a way to kind of... So it's kind of nice to see that she's, in the mix, because she helped me a lot when I was kind of much more focused on writing fiction myself. So it's kind of nice that they're kind of reaching out to that. So that's a positive. So I'm definitely going to buy it. I feel like, this isn't necessarily what I thought it was going to be, but I'm going to give it a fair shake. It's like, not everything needs to go through the Robert filter of like, it's all awful until I get a copy of it in my hand. Right. I don't want to be super negative, because I think I get the idea of the spirit. This is going to be much more of a light... Maybe not. Who knows? I mean, some people can do amazing things with 10 pages. Yeah.
But I think it is going to be not an experiment, but you said just kind of like a fun idea. Like, oh, wouldn't it be fun to, their spin or their twist on A New Hope is, what if we tell the whole movie from the perspective of background characters? And then this is their way of doing that.
And it also makes me really wish I knew about this so I could have pitched an idea. But what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Because I have all kinds of ideas. Nobody ever asked me. Nobody ever asked me. I'm sure Lucasfilm would love listening to a podcast where I suspect about all the things that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, yeah, that is now. When is that slated for?
October 2017.
Oh wow, it feels
coming up.
It feels like it's a long ways away, but
it's about 5 months.
Oh, that's not much.
A little more. Yeah. We're also getting, and I briefly alluded to this last week when talking about stuff that they announced at Celebration, but we are getting the Journey to the Last Jedi, much in the same way that we got Journey to the Force Awakens, a series of books and comics that all kind of either tied in directly to the movie or at least just gave a little more background on what was happening in the Star Wars galaxy that, would kind of help inform what, we as the audience would bring into the movie, right? So you had the Shattered Empire comics that, kind of described what happened immediately post Return of the Jedi, and then you had books for younger readers about what Rey and Finn and Poe were doing kind of immediately before the events of The Force Awakens. So we are getting a similar idea with Episode 8. Phasma is being featured relatively prominently. So Delilah Dawson, who wrote the short story about Basie Natal that you and I both like a good deal. She's writing a book about Phasma. And then Phasma is also getting her own, 5-issue comics miniseries that shows how she escaped Starkiller Base at the end of The Force Awakens and survived to be in The Last Jedi. Claudia Gray, who wrote she wrote a book about Leia. She's writing another book about Leia.
Bloodline.
Yes, thank you. Because I was going to say Lost Stars, but she did write Lost Stars, but that's not the book about Leia.
Right.
This book about Leia is going to be a young adult novel, as was Lost Stars. So that I thought she did a decent job. I thought she did a pretty good job writing Leia in Bloodline. We talked about it when the book came out. Kind of Leia's Force abilities, Force powers, we were both like, well, it's a little disappointing, but who knows how much of that came from her. But I certainly, I think Bloodline is still probably the best of the new canon books that's been written so far. And then you have Ken Liu, who's a science fiction fantasy author, writing a book called The Legends of Luke Skywalker. And I think it's not young adult, but it's like whatever is just below young adult in terms of age ranges. It's not for young readers. It's not young adult. It's whatever's in between those two things. So he's writing, a Luke Skywalker book. I'm sure there will be others announced, but that's what I remember from last week. So how do you feel about getting all of this written material?
Well, I probably won't dip my toe much into the young adult stuff, but it's like the Phasma stuff is interesting but also concerning at the same time. It's like that thing where it's like, I was big into like thinking Phasma was going to be like this big part of The Force Awakens, and obviously she turned out not to be. And it almost makes me wonder now, so like they're doing like, if they're filling, is it, Star Wars has always kind of been more impressionistic rather than they tell you exactly how things happen or whatever. So it might be a sign that maybe Phasma's still not going to be that big part of 8, that kind of idea, like, well, we better get ahead of this because she doesn't have a big part in this. She's not she's just a stormtrooper, but if we kind of maybe use our ancillary material to kind of build up her mythology in some ways, like the way that Boba Fett was introduced in Empire via the cartoon of the the holiday special and the mail
Sure.
away. That was a lot of that kind of like, and I think because even though Boba Fett was, had this huge mythology, he doesn't really do much. He doesn't really do much in, he pulls guns on people. He takes 2 pot shots at Luke, and then he slinks out the back or whatever. Again, I think Phasma might be kind of gearing up to be kind of the Boba Fett of the new trilogy, and the fact that, well, now he appears in every movie of the original. So,
Yeah.
she's hinted to, she's alluded to, and then most of the meat on the bone is in the ancillary material and maybe not in the movie. Because I haven't heard anybody kind of push forward like a narrative at Celebration interviews, like somebody, I don't even know if anybody asked, where like, Phasma's got a much larger part and all this kind of, I've seen a behind the scenes photo of her and of Gwendolyn Christie sans helmet, kind of just lounging and hanging out with Boyega. So I kind of assume they work together again in this, and maybe that's kind of, she's, I don't know, either the MacGuffin or the, what is it, wow, I don't know who's the cop in Les Miserables, that kind of.
Oh, I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Anyway, yeah, it's that. It's not Jean Valjean, because I think that's the protagonist, but
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's with Phasma. I think it's not quite the same, but it's similar to what happened with Poe, where they thought Poe Dameron was going to die in Episode 7, and then he didn't. And so with Phasma, I think the intention was that was going to be the last we saw of her when Han goes, "Is there a garbage chute around here?" And Finn goes, "Yeah, there is," and that's the last we see of Phasma. I think the intention was probably that that's the last we see of her, just at all, or at least in the movies. But then that character was so popular, just from the kind of iconic chrome stormtrooper armor, that was such a hit and so popular that I think they were like, well, let's find a way to bring her back,
right?
And so that means they have to, at the same time, they're like, yeah, we'll find a way to bring her back, but at the same time, she's certainly not a central antagonist. Even, maybe she has her own kind of side bit with Finn, but you still have Snoke, you still have Kylo Ren, you still have Hux, you still have whomever Benicio del Toro is playing, all of that kind of stuff. So
that is, you keep reminding me of that huge cast.
Right, so she's probably not going to get a ton of screen time. She may, it looks like, end up playing a larger part in this Poe Dameron comic. Maybe not. But yeah, I think she's just a character that was popular, that they, I mean, that's why I'm all for her getting a comics, miniseries, but I think them having to use it to show how she escapes Starkiller Base at the end of The Force Awakens is a little like, you can think of a better story to tell about her, but they need to explain it because now she's going to be in The Last Jedi, when everyone thought she was dead, that they have to kind of like burn this miniseries on that, which is, I mean, we'll see. Maybe it'll turn out to be fantastic, but if you were to, ask me or probably a lot of people, like, what's the one Phasma story you would want to tell in comics? Her escaping Starkiller Base would probably not be at the top of the list. So the book could be really good, because Delilah Dawson, that short story, Bazine and Tull, is not really like, she's the protagonist of the story, but she's still like this kind of, I don't even know she's a bounty hunter, but she's not a good guy, right? Like in The Force Awakens, her job was to alert the First Order, right? It's First Order, is that what it's called? Yeah, the First Order. Sorry, I've been, so her job was to alert the First Order that, Han Solo and was there, right? So that they could come try to get him. So, but it was told in such a way that made her character really interesting. It provided a lot of depth for this character, who had like one line in the movie. And so I'm hopeful that the book at least will bring a lot of that to Phasma as well.
Yeah, and in the defense of the tie-in thing, I will say that in some ways they can actually improve on stuff. Like, I consider that the story behind how 3PO got his red arm was actually far more intriguing than the actual fact that he had a red arm.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? It's like that kind of like that hippie kind of like, oh, I think somebody ate magic mushrooms and wrote a Star Wars one-off kind of attitude that I enjoyed. It was a much better payoff than the concept of like, oh, you must not recognize me because I have this red arm that means so much to me that I don't have it at the end of the film. And you're like, all right, wait a second. But again, she might have all kinds of, we might get to find out all these kind of things about Phasma that, might expand the character. And it's, again, with Star Wars, they move, these movies move so fast. They're carrying such a huge cast. Maybe that's the 21st century solution to a lot of these problems because, Lucasfilm never really, with the original trilogy, never spent a lot of time tying in, stuff. They did the comic books, but really they were always very smart not smart, but that was very intentionally. They didn't ever want to do anything that would make you feel like confused coming into the film. So I guess it's that thing where it's like these things are always a reaction to the films, not a thing where like in the prequels, I don't know. I mean, George was involved with all that. So we're talking one master and, I don't know how much he was involved in, like, say, The Approaching Storm or Labyrinth of Evil, which were the two pre, Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith tie-in books. Which they really sold, like, if you really want to get into this, you need to read this first. And you're like, and then you go and you read the book and you're like, oh, it was all right. And then you go see the movie and you're like, yeah, I didn't need to read this.
I didn't need to do that.
So I will be cautiously optimistic. I mean, she's still probably aesthetically my favorite addition to the universe, because it plays into the idea that I feel like maybe Disney's being a little bit too conservative with their Stormtrooper designs. And I like the chrome. Yeah. I like the fact that it doesn't really make sense, because it's like you're going to go into battle and you've got chrome on. It's like you're either going to be a walking reflector or you're just going to get dirty. And it's like, yeah, well, it's Star Wars. Relax.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think there was a hint that she was one of the kids. I mean, if you haven't read Aftermath, Empire's End, and you plan to, this will be a spoiler, but if you don't have any plans, this is fine. But I think there's a hint that, so at the end of Empire's End, Hux, the person who becomes General Hux, Armitage Hux, he's a young man himself. They abscond with a bunch of, like, kids from all over the place to try to train to become the first generation of the new First Order troopers. And I think there's a hint that Phasma is one of those kids. So, whether, the book, I don't know where in the timeline the book will take place, but I think certainly they've laid the groundwork for a lot more Phasma to be out there, and for her to develop into an interesting character, more so than her movie appearances would seem. And so I think you're right. She does kind of become, in some ways, the next Boba Fett, without them really setting out to do that intentionally. Right? It's not like George Lucas saying, like, oh, what do we have, a woman bounty hunter, and then we'll just call her Babe Fett. Or I guess he didn't call her. He didn't call her Babe Fett. That was the concept artist who just called her that. But, it felt like forced, when you found out that was that character's name, not her real name, her name, but that's what they referred to her as. It's like, it feels like you're trying too hard to, like, turn this into the next Boba Fett. You're trying to make it happen, and you should just let it happen organically. And I feel like with Phasma, at least, it has, at least so far, happened a little more organically. And so it it feels a little fresher and like, oh yeah, this could be, they could develop her into an interesting character. And I am more interested to see that than I would be if they like created this character for the express purpose of being the next Boba Fett.
Right. So yeah, there's a lot of bookish, comic-ish stuff in the horizon for us to read. Although there hasn't been, I mean, now that Thrawn's out, and hopefully I'll be done with it. I know John's already finished Thrawn. I've been slow, Mr. Slow Reader, so I'm not obviously not ready to do it. But hopefully by next week, or whenever our next episode is, I'll be ready to do it. But have you heard anything else on the horizon, like except for this point of view and the Phasma thing?
I think in July is when the next the Battlefront 2 tie-in novel Inferno Squad comes out. I believe that's in July. But yeah, I was noting that too, that it doesn't seem like there's a lot out there that we know of, and it could be that, you know, more will be announced and we'll get more stuff coming out September, October, November, or December. But yeah, as far as publishing stuff goes, at least for the adult and YA novels that are the ones that I would be paying attention to, I think it's just the Inferno Squad, and then a certain point of view, and then when we get into October, November, that's when it picks up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense because they are doing this new thing with Episode 8, where it will be starting right after where Episode 7 left off. So they aren't going to have opportunities to do a novel like, oh, this is where the universe is right up to the, this movie, they've done in previous things. So there's not going to be no gap. So there's really no place for a tie-in novel. It'd probably be everything. I mean, I don't know if it'll be interesting to see if Episode 9 is just if they're going to do the whole trilogy one right after the other in the timeline, or they're going to jump ahead, or who knows, because I think a lot of it,
right.
I think a lot of it's up in the air right now, because if Ryan's not doing it and we've got new people and they're going close to a table read, maybe they've gone in a different direction. I do not know. I mean, we haven't heard.
I should note that the Phasma novel comes out September 1st, as does the Claudia Gray Leia Princess of Alderaan novel. So I think September, but at least that's according to Amazon. But so I think September is when a lot of the stuff will start coming out, and so maybe over the summer we'll start hearing a little more about what they're going to release. Because I can't imagine that their journey to The Last Jedi is only going to consist of, what is it, like 4 books and 1 comic miniseries. Maybe it will, because this isn't the first Star Wars movie we've had in 20, 30 years, but 20 years. But, it certainly seems like we should expect more to come.
Yeah, I mean, we got, I know, I guess. Yeah, I was going to say, we got Rebels, but Rebels doesn't inform that either, so I don't know what I'm saying. It's like, yeah, maybe it's just a different marketing strategy. I mean, we are dealing with, the stuff I'm talking about is slowly creeping into the 20-year mark of 20-year-old ideas of how to promote ancillary material before the release of a movie, and so maybe... I'm still thinking in that thinking like, well, the new way that they're doing it, well, the new way is now the old way, and maybe it's maybe it's comic books, maybe it's young adult stuff, but I don't know what it is. It's just I cannot get into that young adult stuff. Something about the writing style just does not gel with me. But that's me. We all know about me. Well, I think that's probably a good place to stop for the week. We've been going a while.
I think so too.
We had a full intention of getting into catching up on comics, but once again, we're going to table that maybe next week. Who knows? Mm-hmm. But I don't know. You people reading the comics? What's your take?
Think?
Yeah. Where are you feeling about this right now? And I think you guys by now know hosts. That's HOSTS at talkingbirdcast.com is the best way to get a hold of us directly. If you want to show concern for my angst about non-release of the original versions of the trilogy. You just need to get me some numbers of some professional help. That's always available. Or you can just send us codes for free movies. You could send John free movie codes for all the Star Wars movies so you can take them everywhere or whatever. Or you can just say hi. We're also available at Talking Birdcast on Twitter. We have a website at www.talkingbirdcast.com. We also have an Amazon affiliate link, which is a great way to support the show, and I know you guys do it, and I appreciate it. It helps a little bit to keep the show afloat. It is www.talkingbirdcast.com/Amazon. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Hey, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. It's always fun doing this for you. And for Talking Birdcast, I have been Robert Zachary.
I'm still John Llewellyn.
He's birthday boy John Llewellyn. Don't forget to wish him a happy birthday. Thanks for listening, and may the Force be with you.
The idea was simply to do a high-adventure film that I loved when I was a kid with meaningful psychological themes. And, I don't know what I felt. It was like a really cockamamie idea. So I did that. But, again, seeing the film tonight and seeing it when we were shooting in various places after the first one, seeing all the kids, it's hard for people to realize, and I'm not supposed to say this, and I wasn't supposed to say it then, but, it's a film for 12-year-olds.
Oh, snap!